Hey, my name is Deven Trivedi, and for my Multicultural Markets for Entrepreneurship class, I chose to research ENDA, which is the federal law that would provide equal benefits in the workplace for LGBT individuals, and they could be judged by their job performance and not their sexual orientation or gender identity. Currently, only 21 states and the District of Columbia have legislation that prevents workplace discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, and only 16 states have legislation that bars employment discrimination on the basis of gender identity. I personally feel very strongly about this, so I was really interested in the way specifically the Rutgers-Newark student community felt about this. And being a filmmaker, I literally took my camera and went out and interviewed a bunch of students, and the following is what I found out. Are you aware that currently only 21 states and the District of Columbia have laws that bar employment discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, and only 16 states bar discrimination on the basis of gender identity?
I wasn't aware.
I wasn't aware of that at all.
Not till right now, no.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
I wasn't before, but I am now.
No, I was not aware of that.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
No, I was not aware.
Actually, no.
No, I was not aware of that.
No, I was not aware.
No.
No, I wasn't aware. Yes, I am aware of that.
I didn't know, actually. You told me.
Yes, I do.
I was familiar with some states, but I didn't know only 21.
Would you be supportive of ENDA, the federal law that would provide LGBT individuals equal protections and benefits in the workplace, such as the right to be judged by their job performance and not their sexual orientation or gender identity?
Absolutely. Everyone should be treated equally, regardless of race or sexual preference. Everyone deserves equality, especially in this country that is built on equality.
Of course.
Yes, because I believe everybody should be judged on their job performance, on their personality, and not their sexual orientation.
Yeah, that would be great.
I definitely would support that.
I'd be in support of it just because it's a lot more fair.
Absolutely. That's the qualification the job should be based on. So.
Yes, I would.
Yes, I would. Because I feel that, it's not your sexual orientation that makes you do your job well, it's who you are. It's the person.
Absolutely. I would agree with that 100% because it shouldn't matter what sexual orientation that you are. We are people at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter. Equal opportunity for people based on job performance. I agree with that 100%.
Yes, I think that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be based on anything else but what you do in the actual company.
Definitely.
Yes, so
Of course, I feel like everyone deserves equality.
Right,
I think that's really important to make it aware and end that, because that's just not cool. Who are you to say what I can't do just because of my sexual orientation?
I would support that.
Yes.
Which companies do you consider LGBTQ friendly and why?
Actually, as I was explaining to somebody earlier, whenever I have any questions in regards to how friendly an company would be toward the LGBT population, I have this app on my phone that is put out by HRC. And I look up the app and it's broken down into different categories, and I can access any sort of companies, I can search on any sort of companies, and it gives a rating on how LGBT friendly a company is, and you could actually drill down into the company to see on what areas they are or are not LGBT friendly, supportive. And one of the things that's really helpful about that app is when students are filling out resumes, when they're applying for jobs, when they ask us here at the center where would be a good place to submit their resume, we can use this app as a resource to tell students you can submit to these companies. They're very supportive. They'd be comfortable for you to be out, to be yourself, and to be accepted just as you are.
I consider companies such as Target, Starbucks, Ford, all to be LGBT, just name a few, to be LGBT friendly. And I think because those are the companies that I see that haven't ever ever vocalized any opposition towards the gay community.
I don't really know any companies that
I wish I had an answer to that question. I've just never done any research.
I don't know any personally, but I do have a friend who's a lesbian, and I know she works for Verizon. I'm not sure if it's really out there, but that's really the only company I would say.
At the top of my head, I can't think of any that are.
I think Brilla, the pasta company, is not LGBTQ friendly. I feel hypocritical because they're talking about how the nuclear family is important, and so that's why they show it in their commercials. But they didn't show that in their commercials. They just showed people trying to hook up with spaghetti.
I'm gonna say Macy's, because every time I go into Macy's, I somehow get rung up by a gay man, and I think it's awesome, because they're always super friendly.
I believe that MAC is more LGBT friendly. I feel like the more diverse that they are, the more clients that would want to come and get their makeup done.
I'm actually not aware of any companies, to be honest.
Rutgers, I do.
Probably not Chick-fil-A.
The one that I could say that I know of, be CoverGirl, because they work with Ellen DeGeneres.
I don't know, maybe retail stores. I don't really know about any type of big corporations that condone that type of behavior. I'm pretty sure they'll get sued for it, you know what I mean?
I really don't know of any, but I wouldn't understand why a company wouldn't support the LGBT community.
I honestly cannot tell you. I have no idea which one.
I would say Target, because when I go to Target, I see a very diverse community.
I personally think American Apparel is LGBTQ friendly because they have a shirt that I actually bought that says, I believe it says gay is okay.
Do you feel businesses face a trade-off between being LGBT inclusive and remaining competitive in the market?
I think that people there's a stigma attached still with a certain faction of society that if they embrace it, they'll be ostracized by a portion. But nowadays, I think there's more of a benefit to it if you embrace it than there would have been maybe 10 years ago. So the trade-off is probably not what it would have been 10 years ago. It's more in the advantage now.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm sure they can be judged.
They do to an extent, but I think now in 2013, if a business is not LGBT friendly, they're going to do more harm to themselves and their infrastructure than they would if they, as opposed to 10 years ago, if they were LGBT friendly, then it would have harmed them more then to be LGBT friendly than it is now to not be LGBT friendly.
I think with any business, when you make a decision to do one thing, you will lose some people, but I think today, the people they will lose are going to be like a fraction of the people they will definitely gain.
I mean, if you're LGBT inclusive, that just means you have more prospects as to who your employers are. So wouldn't that make you more competitive? You want the best of the best, no matter who they going home to love.
No, not at all. I mean, every person has their own personality and their own individuality, so everyone should always have a chance to work as a team, no matter what their color, what race is, So I just feel any person should always have a chance to do anything when it comes to any kind of job.
I do feel like they do have a trade-off with certain businesses, but I feel that more people are more open to diversity.
Personally, I think we're living in a movement where people would appreciate gay people working, because we're super awesome and rad. And I think it'd be cool, yeah.
It doesn't matter, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter like the type of person. If you're qualified for the job, if you're performing what you need to perform, doesn't matter what you do outside your job. Whether a man wants to dress up in women's clothes or whatever people want to do outside, that's their business, Just as long as they go to work, they conduct themselves professionally, I don't really see a problem.
No, I don't think that's a trade-off. In fact, I think it's an asset. Because then they get the best talent regardless of, what their sexual orientation is, religion, or whatever.
I don't think there's a trade-off because I think the thing is that when companies know that, I'm sorry, not companies, but when companies support this, I think a lot of other people will embrace it because the thing is we're all diverse, we're different, and the thing is nobody wants to be looked at and said, hey, this company doesn't like someone who's gay or lesbian or whatever. They want to be supportive. We're all different, and we should, feel great that a company embraces this.
the whole sexual orientation, like, it's not relevant to a person's competitiveness. If a person's qualified for a job, then they're qualified for the job. And their personal life has something to do with how they handle themselves in the business.
I mean, like, sort of. If more companies start doing it more and more, then others can join them and they'll be on the same level field.
I feel like no, because it just shows more of an acceptance toward a group. So, I mean, more LGBTQ people would probably accept that. So it would benefit them, the company.
Absolutely, yes, of course. Actually, I feel like today, if you try to reach out and include the LGBT community, you'll prosper, because I feel like this generation is more open.
No, I don't think there's a trade-off. I think the more diverse companies are, the more successful they'll be, especially in today's age where globalization. You know, the more diverse your workforce is, the better chance you have at getting new ideas and different perspectives.
If you're gonna try and run a really good business and be successful, you have to you have to be open-minded and like include everyone.
That was an amazing experience, and honestly it was one of the best experiences of my entire career as a student at Rutgers University, and there's many things that I learned. All 18 individuals were not aware that currently there is no federal legislation providing these equal benefits really to LGBT individuals in the workplace, so that they can also have the opportunity to be judged by their job performance and not their sexual orientation or their gender identity. All 18 people also were very receptive to the idea of passing a federal level legislation that would provide these benefits. The next questions I asked the students that I interviewed in Rutgers-Newark was which companies they perceived to be LGBTQ friendly and why. And with this question, there were some companies that I heard in the responses that I expected to hear. There were some companies that I expected to hear that I did not hear. For instance, for me personally, the first company that comes to mind is Apple. And they've always led the charge in terms of having LGBTQ inclusive policies. And I was surprised not to hear that name thrown out. The last question that I asked the students that I interviewed was, do they perceive to be a trade-off for businesses and firms in terms of projecting an LGBTQ-friendly image and brand and competitiveness? And just to give some background information about this topic, from my own research outside of these interviews, businesses went through a little bit of an evolution with the LGBTQ demographic and market. In the 80s and early 90s, they more or less avoided not only the issue in general, but this entire demographic to market to them because of the stigma that was associated with them. In the late 90s, they started becoming a little bit cautious and interested in this demographic. And of course, then in the 2000s, there was a study recently done and that found that as of 2010, the purchasing power of the LGBTQ demographic and LGBTQ-owned businesses was approximately $835 billion. So in the 2000s, companies have aggressively pursued this market. Also interesting to note in terms of this evolution, in 2002, when the Human Rights Campaign published its first corporate equality index, only 16 firms achieved a full 100% with the corporate equality index. 10 years later, in 2012, when the Human Rights Campaign published the same corporate equality index, nearly 200 firms had received a 100% rating. Also from the same time, the Human Rights Campaign did a study in 2009, and they found that 86% of Fortune 500 companies already had policies that prohibited discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, and 16% of Fortune 500 companies had policies that prevented discrimination on the basis of gender identity and gender expression, which is very exciting, and that is definitely something to be proud of. And lastly, as of 2008, 83% of Fortune 100 companies had policies that offered same-sex domestic partner benefits to their employees. So there's definitely many major strides that are being made by the private sector, and it's both heartwarming and inspiring to see that the private sector within the United States is leading the charge in terms of equality and providing these basic equal protections in the workplace for the LGBTQ community. I'm very hopeful that in the near future, the federal government will follow suit and there will be some kind of a universal binding resolution like ENDA that would provide these benefits in the workplace to all LGBT individuals across all 50 states in the workplace. And just remember to increase your capacity to give and receive love a little bit more today than you did yesterday. Thank you.
Hold you tonight, maybe this, maybe that. I just wanna feel attached to somebody that will last. I don't wanna live in the past. Someday I'm gonna be loved.